I know fall is on the brain and I'm looking up fall recipes left and right. So I figured I would share my top 10 favorite budget-friendly fall recipes.
We're gonna start off by making a sweet potato shepherd's pie, which is one of my favorite budget classics. In the fall, it's something that I make every year and it is so easy and so cheap. I'm starting off with 1.5 pounds of these sweet potato steamers that I got at Walmart, but you can just grab whatever sweet potatoes you have. I know that Aldi sells them for really inexpensive in like a 3-pound bag. So you just need 1 to 2 pounds of those and you can steam them or boil them. I will put a recipe down in the description box for you. I just did mine in the microwave like it said on the package. Then you'll also want 1 medium yellow onion chopped and 3 medium cloves of garlic finely minced. And then the recipe calls for 1 cup of beef broth and 2 teaspoons of cornstarch. So I'm just using 1 cup of warm water and 1 cube of beef bouillon, and then the 2 teaspoons of cornstarch. And you just want to mix this together. We're going to make kind of a slurry that we're going to add later to our mixture. I have made a shepherd's pie like this, or sometimes people call it a cottage pie, with many different meats. So sometimes if you have like a leftover shredded chicken or a leftover really any meat, or you have fresh ground beef like I happen to have, or fresh ground turkey or chicken, all of those things work so well in this and they are all delicious. So it doesn't exactly matter what you have, and that's why this is kind of a favorite budget meal, because you can swap things in and out, no problem. You don't need to go out and buy anything special. You can usually make it work with what you have in your fridge or freezer. I'm just cooking my ground beef over medium-high heat until it's cooked all the way through and no longer pink. Then I added in my onion and cooked for about 6 minutes until the onion softened slightly. Now, as far as vegetables go in this, you can use what you have. If I had fresh carrots, I would have chopped those up and put them in with the onion, but unfortunately I did not. You can also use like a frozen mixed vegetable. I'm personally going to use a can of mixed vegetables because that's what I had on hand. And even though I'm looking at the can, I'm like, this has potatoes in it and there's potatoes on top. It was fine. Like, it's delicious. Don't worry too much about what that mixture is. The original recipe calls for fresh carrots to be added with the onions and then some frozen peas to be added later, but make it your own. Once that onion was cooked down, I did add in 1 drained can of mixed vegetables and my chopped garlic. You also want to add 2 tablespoons of tomato paste, and I just had mine from the freezer. Whenever I open a can of it, I do make sure to put whatever is left in tablespoon portions in my freezer. Then you want to add about a tablespoon of what they call woody herbs. So I'm using rosemary and sage, along with about 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Now for me, sage is just the quintessential fall spice. I use it all the time in my fall cooking, so it just feels like it to me. I love it. You just want to cook that for about a minute, stirring constantly to make sure that everything is well incorporated. And then you can stir in your cornstarch mixture. And if you are adding a cup of peas and you did the carrots earlier, this is when you would add the peas. We're also going to add in a tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce and about 1/4 teaspoon of ground pepper. Once the mixture has thickened about 2 to 3 minutes, you can just remove this from the heat. And in the meantime, we'll get the sweet potato mash finished so that we can make the whole casserole. This mixture is super easy. I'm just using a hand masher, but if you prefer to use like your mixer, go ahead and do that. I have removed all of the skins from the sweet potatoes. I actually just waited a little bit for them to cool down and I just pulled the skins off. But if you were cooking your sweet potatoes any other way, you could just actually peel the skins off beforehand. That's fine too, whatever's easier for you. To that, I'm adding 1/2 cup of sour cream and 2 tablespoons of melted butter, because everything is better with butter, right? This mash is super simple and super easy. I also think that I've made it many times where I didn't have the sour cream, and that's fine too. Just mash up those sweet potatoes with some salt and butter, and they're gonna be good. Like, this is gonna be great no matter how you make it. I also love this casserole because you can either make it when you're ready to eat it or you can make it ahead of time. It actually goes really well in the fridge or freezer, and you can just reheat it when the time is right. Just want to pour all of your ground beef mixture into the bottom of a 9x13 pan, and then top that with your sweet potato mash. And we're going to cook this at 425 degrees for about 20 minutes. I also happen to have some crescent rolls on hand. These are so inexpensive and such a nice little warm addition to a meal like this. This really is a family favorite, and it's so awesome because you can just use so many things that you may already have on hand in your house and don't have to worry about buying too many ingredients at all. The combination of the beef broth and the Worcestershire sauce really brings a depth of flavor to this that is like no other. And here Julian will give us his thoughts on this delicious meal.
10 out of 10.
You like it?
For this next one, I'm making maple sausage stuffed chicken and pumpkin risotto. And I actually have Texas Roadhouse rolls on the side too. And I will put the video where I made those down in the description box below because those are fantastic. This is another one of those kind of wing it recipes based off of what I have in my cabinets at that time. But I made this up years ago and I'm still in love. I'm using chicken breast, celery, some stuffing that I still have from last Thanksgiving, brown and served maple sausage, apple, and onion. Now, you don't need celery, but if you have it, go ahead and slice up a stalk. I do love celery in my stuffing, like at Thanksgiving, so I just always think if you're making stuffing, why don't you add some celery because it gives it a nice crunch and a nice flavor. I'm going to talk a lot about substitutes with this one because I feel like there is just so much that can be done. So I am going to use one apple, but you could use a pear if you have it, and if you don't have any fruit like that, you don't even really have to use a fruit in it. It's going to taste delicious even if you just have like the stuffing and the sausage. That's going to be just fine. I am peeling my apple today and then going to dice it, but I've also made this without peeling the apple, so it's whatever you're feeling that day. And I'm actually only going to use about half of the apple in the end, so however much you feel like is right for your amount of chicken will work. I'm using 2 chicken breasts, but I am going to cut them in half. Alternatively, you can also use pork chops with this. I have made this with pork chops before and it's absolutely delicious. So that's another option. And I know that pork chops go on sale a ton this time of year. You can even get those packs that are like different sizes and shapes. And this is perfect for that because we're just going to pound it out thin and then roll it up. So it doesn't really matter what exact type of pork that you have. I'm also dicing up an onion, but you could use a teaspoon of onion powder if that's all you have. In a large pot over medium heat, and I don't even know what is up with my filming right now, but hey, it's what I did. You want to add about a tablespoon of butter, or you can use whatever type of oil that you have, and then your onion, your celery, and your apple. And then you just want to cook that down for about 5 minutes or so until your onion is soft. In the meantime, I have microwaved my maple sausage. You can use like a regular breakfast maple sausage if you want, or you could even use Italian sausage, whatever you like. Maybe put like a little maple syrup in it, whatever you have on hand. I know sometimes I find that on sale. It's in my freezer. It's what I'm going to use, right? It's still going to be good. You just want that little bit of maple flavor. So however you make it work, do it. I grabbed these because they're super cheap. They're like less than $2 to get a whole package of them. And I really like them. This is how I originally started making the recipe. Like back in college, I think. I was like, you know, grab a cheap package of sausage and make something fall flavored. And I just loved it. So that's my take on the whole maple stuffed chicken thing. And then I'm just going to add my sausage right into my pan there with my onions and celery and apples with 1 cup of water and 1 teaspoon of chicken bouillon. And you can use chicken broth if you have it, or you can just use water and salt if that's what you have. It's going to be fine too. And I'm following the instructions on the back of the package. So I can't remember. I added about half the package of the stuffing. And then I followed the instructions for how much liquid to use with that. So I think half a package equals about 1 cup of liquid. You can read it and kind of figure it out for yourself. But you just want to hydrate your stuffing, basically. And then you can take that off the heat once it's hydrated and it seems like the right consistency for you. If you like yours drier, like go ahead and put a little less water. If you like yours a little bit softer, then go ahead and add more. So that's kind of your take on how you like your stuffing. And then I have 2 huge chicken breasts here. So I'm going to slice them in half and then I'm actually going to flatten them out. If you have thin sliced chicken, that's going to make it even easier for you. If you're using pork chop, if it's like a thin sliced one, you're probably going to want to use the meat mallet and flatten that out too. But if you're using a thicker one, you can actually kind of cut a hole in, like through the middle and make it so that you can stuff inside the pork chop. I've done that before and that was really, really fun and delicious too. So just depends on how you want to do it. I am using a meat mallet here, like the flat side with some saran wrap, but I have seen people just use a rolling pin too, and that's a good option. And then you can use your favorite chicken seasoning. I'm just using a poultry seasoning, but you can just use salt and pepper or whatever you have on hand, whatever you think would taste good. Like I said, sage is so good in a fall meal, so that's a good thing. Salt, pepper, sage, rosemary, something like that. That'd be delicious on your chicken too. And then I'm just going to do my best to stuff them and roll them, and they are awesome. I'm just going to put mine in like a fall type pie plate. You can do a 13x9. You can do a sheet pan. I kind of like putting it in like the pie plate because then you can kind of put the stuffing in and around because you'll have some extra. and it just makes like a really nice plate and meal, and it turns out delicious. I cooked mine at 350 degrees for about 40 minutes. You kind of want to watch it, make sure that you're not overcooking, undercooking. It kind of depends on how thin your meat is, especially if you're doing like a stuffed pork chop. That'll take closer to an hour if you kind of cut the slit in it. But if you made them thinner, they're going to cook closer to what the chicken did. But you do want to make sure that it is fully cooked all the way through, and it will be absolutely delicious. And while that cooks up, I am going to make pumpkin risotto. And is risotto super simple and easy? Well, as far as ingredients, it might be, but it does take a little bit of time and a little bit of patience. But every once in a while, it is just totally worth it. In a large saucepan or skillet, add in 1 tablespoon of olive oil and a pinch of salt and 1 chopped onion. You want to cook this for about 2 minutes on medium-low heat. You can say hi to Elmo. Say hi to Elmo over there in the corner. There's like kids' toys everywhere these days, and it's just real life. After that couple minutes, add in a couple of minced cloves of garlic, or you can do a teaspoon of garlic powder and about a teaspoon of dried sage. After about 30 seconds, just add in about 1.5 cups of arborio rice. And you're going to cook that until translucent, stirring constantly for about a minute. You definitely don't want to let it brown. And then you're going to deglaze the pan with about 1/3 cup of white wine. If you don't have white wine, you can just use water or some chicken stock. Then you're going to want 4 cups of chicken stock, broth, or chicken bouillon as I'm using. And then you want to add 1/2 cup to 1 cup at a time and stir to incorporate. And you want to cook it down until the liquid is almost absorbed, and you basically stir it constantly. You're going to do this until there's no stock left. So it does take about 20 minutes or so to make sure that you're stirring and cooking down and stirring and cooking down. As long as you've been patient enough and really waited until the liquid was absorbed every time and stirred constantly, once all of your liquid is gone, your rice should be completely cooked all the way through. So you're not going to have like any crunchy flavor, but it also shouldn't be pasty and totally mushy. You should have pieces of rice that are distinct pieces of rice that are creamy and delicious. At that point, you want to stir in about 1/2 cup of pumpkin puree, just straight pumpkin, 100% pumpkin, not pumpkin pie, and 1/2 cup of grated Parmesan cheese. And you can just keep this on the heat for just another minute or so to melt all of the cheese and heat up the pumpkin. And that's all you want to do. And your risotto is done, and it's absolutely delicious. Now, this is like relatively simple with things that I usually have on hand, like Parmesan cheese. A can of pumpkin is, very popular this time of year, so I always grab a few of those. And I do have arborio rice usually in my cabinet. I might not be saying that right, so apologize if I'm not, but it's something that I use, every once in a while. So it's worth purchasing kind of like a bigger container of it so that I'm ready when the time is right to make a risotto or something like that. And it is absolutely delicious and totally worth it. This is the wonderful chicken. You can see I could cut it to make sure that it was cooked all the way through after it comes out of the oven. And this was our fall meal on the table, and I was just so pleased and so happy. It is one of my absolute favorites. This next one just screams fall. It's a chicken and squash dinner. Making this in just one pan, and are going to be able to use 99 cents a pound chicken thighs and 99 cents a pound butternut squash. So this is so inexpensive. The whole dinner came to less than $5. I have a pretty small butternut squash here. I also think you could use any squash that you had, or, hey, a neighbor gave you, or you were able to get on sale. You just want to dice this up into cubes, kind of like potatoes. And then I am going to cut up a couple of onions because I love onion in mine, but you totally don't have to do that. You can use onion powder if you need to, just about a teaspoon. And then I'm going to throw 10 whole cloves of garlic in there. You do not have to do that, but it does roast up amazing. And I serve mine with biscuits, and I was able to actually just take the roasted garlic and rub it right over a biscuit, and it was so delicious. That's one of those things that feels so indulgent and gourmet, yet it's actually like pennies on the dollar. It's so cheap to make. I'm also adding 6 chicken thighs to the bowl, and you could do chicken legs, drumsticks if you have them. You could do chicken leg quarters. Whatever you have is going to work here, especially the cheaper the better, right? And then to that you want to add 3 tablespoons of olive oil, about 3/4 of a tablespoon of salt, a teaspoon of black pepper, and I'm using 1 teaspoon of smoked paprika. And if you want to, you can just use regular paprika if you don't like the smoked. And a sprinkle of crushed chili peppers if you'd like. And then the recipe calls for fresh thyme, but I didn't have that, so I used about a teaspoon of dried thyme. This is a very simple yet flavorful seasoning, and you just want to mix everything really well together. I just love using just one bowl for this just to make sure that everything gets well coated. It worked really, really well. And then you just want to pour everything onto a well-coated sheet pan. So I just used mine that had a baking mat on it, but you can use parchment paper or you could use tin foil, whatever you want to just cover it up and make sure that this doesn't stick to the bottom of your pan. You want to bake this at 375 degrees for 1 hour. And the recipe says to then increase the heat to 425 and bake for another 10 to 20 minutes. But at the hour mark, my chicken was super golden, fully cooked through, so I did not need to do that. With this, I just served some like take and bake super cheap Aldi biscuits. And like I said, I was able to rub the garlic over that. Oh my goodness, it was so delicious. This is such a inexpensive, wonderful fall meal. And I feel like if you ever get chicken at a restaurant, for me at least, it's dry. This is so juicy and fabulous. It is just such a winner. For this next one, we're going to use the 99-cent a pound chicken to make Ina's roasted chicken. And instead of carrots, I'm going to use sweet potatoes because those are also on sale this time of year. And so are carrots. Carrots are delicious too. But I wanted to use sweet potatoes because that's what I had on hand. So always think, use what you have on hand, right? I'm also noting a color aesthetic here. We have very like orangey golden colors, which makes sense. Those are fall colors. And it makes sense that the food is that fall color too. You can see this chicken is actually from my freezer. I had bought it on sale in April, and it was time to use it, but I did get it on sale for 99 cents a pound. It's a rather small chicken coming in at less than 3 pounds, so it was only $2.92. We can make this whole dinner, again, for less than $5. I'm using the sweet potatoes because that's what I had on hand, but you can get carrots for less than 99 cents a pound these days, and you can just chop those up and throw those in there. I decided to chop my potatoes into like half circles and make them a little bit bigger than I have in the past, because the last time I made this recipe with carrots, the carrots actually burnt because it was cooking at a high temperature. So you do want to consider that if you are cooking carrots, either add them later if they're small, or if they're bigger, just cut them into large chunks. I also cut an onion into wedges and put the potatoes and the onion in a bottom of a 13x9, but if you have like a roasting pan, you can put them in there too. And then my chicken was so small. The original recipe says to use a whole lemon and cut it in half. Obviously, if you don't have it, that's fine. You can squeeze some lemon juice in the cavity of the chicken if you can. If not, that's going to work fine too. And then I do have one whole head of garlic, and I cut that in half. Again, if you don't have it, you can just do garlic powder. It's totally fine. But what I was saying about the lemon is I could only use half because only half of it actually fit into the chicken. And then you could see that I was taking 2 tablespoons of butter, and I'm just microwaving that and melting it down. You can melt down, or you can even use just olive oil or whatever oil you have too if you don't have fresh butter. Chickens are pretty forgiving like that, which is very nice. I'm just going to pat my chicken dry and then cover it thoroughly with salt and pepper. You also want to make sure to get the salt and pepper into the cavity of the chicken. And I forgot to say, obviously, and maybe it's not obvious, but remove the giblets or whatever else is inside the chicken. You want to make sure that it has an empty cavity. You don't want to cook it with any of those things in there. But, liberally with salt and pepper all over, cover that chicken, season it up. You're going to want lots of flavor in there. And then we're going to stuff it with, like I said, mine only fit 1 lemon. If yours is a little bit larger, go ahead and put both halves of the lemon in there, and then your head of garlic. And then the recipe calls for fresh thyme, but I didn't have that, so I just was using a sprinkle of dried thyme and just putting that all inside of the cavity of the chicken as well. And then I'm just going to brush the outside of the chicken with the butter and make sure that it's fully covered. It's nice because once you put the butter on the cold chicken, it actually hardens kind of onto the chicken, and then it makes this sticky surface. And then we're going to put more salt and pepper on the outside of the chicken, so it gives it even more flavor. This butter does a lot for it. This is my favorite chicken roasting recipe. I find that it's never dry. It is always so flavorful. It is always so juicy, which is amazing. So I don't know if it's the butter. I don't know if it's the fact that you're putting lots of salt and pepper. I don't know if it's the thyme. Whatever it is so good and so worth it. Then I'm just going to toss my sweet potatoes and onion with some olive oil, more salt and pepper, and more dried thyme. Toss that well, and then place the chicken right on top of your veggies. And we're going to put this in the oven for an hour and a half at 425 degrees. And I thought my chicken was going to cook a lot faster because it's quite a bit smaller. You see, I actually did tuck my wings under. I kind of forgot to show you guys that, but you want to try and tuck the wings under. The recipe also says to tie the legs up, but I didn't have any kitchen tie, and I really never do that, and I think it turns out fine, so personal opinion. And you want to cook that for that hour and a half at 425 until the juices run clear. You want to make sure that the temperature on the chicken is 165 degrees or more, and your vegetables should be roasted all the way through. And you can see how beautiful this is. It really did actually roast for the hour and a half. I was surprised, but it was so incredible, so flavorful. There's nothing like cooking sweet potatoes, or in the other recipe, the butternut squash, kind of in those chicken juices. It tastes amazing. I just served mine with super cheap microwave peas, and this was such a lovely fall meal, so inexpensive, and again, it feels gourmet. It just feels so warm, so amazing. Next recipe, we're going to use the Dutch oven, which I was so excited to get a new Dutch oven because I desperately needed one, and make sweet potato turkey chili. You can see I made a little bit of cornbread on the side and had that with a pumpkin head. Comment below if you're also like, gotta have the pumpkin head in the fall because it's so good. You want to start off with 1 diced onion and either 1 really large sweet potato, because I know those exist in many places, or 2 medium to small sweet potatoes, so I just used 2. And then I have 3 cloves of garlic minced. That's pretty much all the chopping that we're going to do for today, so that's out of the way. Everything else we're just going to put right in the pan, and it's going to be so delicious. This is such a nice fall meal. I absolutely love turkey sweet potato chili in the fall. It's something completely different, and I always add a secret ingredient to mine, so don't forget to stick around because it's not your traditional chili. Start off by adding a couple tablespoons of oil over medium heat in your Dutch oven or whatever pan or pot you want to use. Cook that down for about 5 minutes. Then you want to add in about 1 pound of ground turkey, or you can use ground beef here. Or if you want to go vegetarian, you don't even need to use meat at all. We'll just double up on the beans. Any of these items can make this chili extremely inexpensive. I was able to find ground beef and ground turkey on sale in my area for $2.77 again, so I felt like that was a huge win. Sometimes I see like the big logs of ground beef on sale at Aldi for like $2.45. So whatever your sale item is, go ahead and grab that, and you can just use that from your freezer, especially if you defrost it, or go ahead and use beans because those are going to be the least expensive option that there is. You just want to cook your meat until it's no longer pink. Then you're going to add 2 tablespoons of chili powder, 1 teaspoon of ground cumin, 1 teaspoon of paprika, although I use smoked paprika because everything is better with smoked paprika. And if you'd like, you can add a half a teaspoon of cayenne pepper, but I did not do that because that is a no-go in my family. Give that a nice stir, make sure that everything is coated, and then we're going to add those diced sweet potatoes, 1 cup of chicken broth, or I'm using chicken bouillon, so just 1 cup of water and 1 teaspoon of chicken bouillon, 1 can of fire rice roasted diced tomatoes, or if you don't have those, I just used regular diced tomatoes, that was still good, and 1 can of drained kidney beans. This is where, if you're not going to use the meat, go ahead and add whatever beans you like. I think black beans would be absolutely delicious in this as well. And I almost forgot about my secret ingredient, a good dash of cinnamon. Cinnamon with the sweet potatoes and the chili is so incredible, and it does a lot for flavor, and you're not going to feel like it's like a sweet dish at all. It is so delicious. Just want to stir everything really good, and we're going to bring it up to a boil. Once it's at a boil, you want to lower the heat and then put the cover on kind of a jar and let it cook for 15 to 25 minutes. And that's going to depend on how thick or big you cut the sweet potato pieces. So you just want to check them. Once they're softened, your chili is done. I served this for the first regular season football game of the season. I know I said season twice, I don't know. I put sour cream on mine, some cheddar cheese. Like I said, I had a pumpkin head. I had some cilantro. You can put avocado on this, whatever you like.
The next recipe is a mashed sweet potato recipe. I'm just starting off by cooking the sweet potatoes in the Instant Pot. It is honestly so easy. You just pop the potatoes into the Instant Pot with 1 cup of water. Then you're just going to cook them for 15 minutes on high pressure, and then let it release on regular steam release for 10 minutes. Your result is perfectly cooked sweet potatoes. I actually just took these out, let them cool off, and put them in the fridge overnight until it was time for me to make my casserole. When you take them out of the fridge, it's amazingly easy to just peel the skins right off, no problem. Now I'm just using a hand masher to mash these up, and I'm really making up my recipe as I go here. What tastes good in sweet potatoes? I've got about 2 tablespoons of unsweetened almond milk, half a teaspoon of cinnamon, a 1/4 cup of brown sugar, and 2 tablespoons of melted butter. If you wanted to make these vegan, you could definitely use a vegan butter and they would turn out just fine. I'm just going to place the mashed potatoes into this little casserole dish, and then I have these maple toasted pecans. If you don't have these type of pecans, you could just use plain pecans, or you could put them with some brown sugar or roast them up. I'm just going to chop these up, taste them, they're so good. Just make sure it would taste right, and place them on top of my casserole. This casserole just needs to be cooked in the oven at 350 for about 20 minutes for a perfectly warm sweet potato that is absolutely stunning. It is a favorite fall recipe of mine from now on.
Next up, we're making a German cabbage in the Instant Pot. This is truly delicious, and even if you're not a cabbage fan, this will make you change your mind.
So I had some red cabbage. I'm like, what am I going to do with this? I'm thinking it would taste good with apples. So I found this recipe. It includes an apple, some onion, brown sugar, some apple cider vinegar, and a little bit of butter. So we've got 2 tablespoons of butter in our Instant Pot, 2 tablespoons of brown sugar, 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar, and then I'm just going to chop the rest of this head of cabbage very thinly. Honestly, my husband basically declared that he hates cabbage and was horrified that I was making this meal. But once I cooked it, not only was it so easy, he absolutely loved it and he wants me to make it again. He was so shocked and surprised that you could make cabbage like this. So I'm just going to peel my apple and then actually grate it. So there's not really any chunks of apple in this recipe, but it does have that nice sweet flavor to it, and you can really tell that the apple's in there. If I was doing like a larger recipe, I might use my food processor, but in this case, the grater works just fine for the single apple. Really doesn't make as much as I thought it did, but it really makes an impact with the taste. My favorite thing about this recipe is that it's set and forget. I'm literally going to take this onion and just grate up 2 tablespoons of it. It's a very small amount. I'm just going to set the Instant Pot for high for 3 minutes once everything is in there, and then once it's gone off, I'm going to quick release for about 5, and that's it. It's so fast and so amazing.
2 things I love about these pumpkin pancakes: no egg, and they don't taste like those like crazy pumpkin flavored stuff. They're just pumpkin-y enough, just enough flavor, and they're so simple. So we're going to start off with 1 2/3 a cup of pancake mix. To that, you want to add a half a teaspoon of cinnamon. If you have it, you can do pumpkin pie spice, but I think that would be what makes it kind of more of that like pumpkin pie-y flavor. I actually just used a half a teaspoon of nutmeg and left it at that. Then you're going to need a half a cup of pumpkin puree, 2 cups of milk, and a 1/4 cup of oil. And I am considering this a pantry meal because I always keep shelf-stable milk on hand in my pantry, which I recommend you do too. It's a super easy way to be able to have milk when you need it. Now the batter did feel a little bit thin to me, so I did add another 1/3 of a cup of pancake mix to this, and mine came out nice and fluffy, so it might be closer to 2 cups. I know that kind of varies depending on the temperature and climate that you live in, so kind of feel it out, make it sure that it feels right for you. And then I am using butter, but you can use cooking spray, you can use Crisco, you can use oil, whatever you want to cook up these pancakes. I should have done them in a griddle, but I had them on a pan because my griddle broke a while ago, and it's on the list, guys. But hey, here we are cooking some delicious pancakes in a pan, you know, the usual way that you cook pancakes. I don't know if there's anything fancy about this. I like to cook mine over more of like a medium-low heat versus a higher heat because I feel like they don't cook like too fast on the outside and not enough on the inside, right? You want to make sure they cook all the way through without burning on the outside. And like I said, nice and light and fluffy and delicious. You would never know that these didn't have any egg in them or anything, and they are just amazing. Ben absolutely loved them. Tommy loved them, so they are a win in our house. And it made a bunch of them. I like to freeze these and then just heat them up in the microwave like 30 seconds or pop them in the toaster, and they are a perfect snack or breakfast. Another thing that I have been seeing for 99 cents a pound or less is totes of apples. So I wanted to make these delicious cinnamon apple oatmeal muffins. I'm going to start by getting my ingredients ready. So I'm just going to melt 1 tablespoon of butter, peel my apple, and chop it. Yes, we're only using 1 apple. I was so excited. I'm like, yes, I found a great apple recipe. And then I look at it and I'm like, yep, we're going to use 1 apple. And as that is with so many fruit recipes, like when you have fruit in the summer, anytime when you have fruit and you're trying to bake with it because you have an excess, it's hard to use all of it. The only thing I think that like really uses a lot of it is like if you're making jam or jellies or sauces. Luckily, we are using the rest of our totes these days because I am dicing up apples or slicing up apples for my kids every single day. I'm like, this is the fruit we're having because it's in season. I feel like all the best muffins come with a crumble or a topping. So we're going to make the topping first by taking that 1 tablespoon of melted butter, mixing that with a 1/4 cup of quick oats, 1 tablespoon of brown sugar, and a 1/4 teaspoon of ground cinnamon. You can set that aside, and we'll start by mixing our dry ingredients: 1½ cups of quick cooking oats, 1½ cups of all-purpose flour, 1/2 cup of brown sugar, 1½ teaspoons of ground cinnamon, 1 teaspoon of baking powder, 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda, and 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And I will make sure to put this recipe in the description box below so that you can go look at them if you want to. I know there's a lot of ingredients there, but luckily these are all things that I already had on hand because I have a stocked pantry and there were not any specialty ingredients that I needed to go out and buy. Now in a separate bowl, I'm going to mix my wet ingredients: 1/2 cup of milk, 1/2 cup of unsweetened applesauce, 1/4 cup of vegetable oil, 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract, and 1 large egg. You would mix that together and also mix your dry ingredients together if you haven't already done that, and then mix all of it together, and that's going to make your delicious muffin batter. And you want to also put your apples in, obviously, so fold those in once everything is really well mixed. And if you noticed, if you have a keen eye and you were really paying attention, you'd notice that I actually forgot to put the cinnamon in at the beginning in the dry ingredients. So I did add that at the end because I realized there was something had gone awry. Now this recipe makes 12 muffins. I did decide to use muffin cups for mine. You just want to fill them. It said 3/4 of the way full. It was almost like completely full. And then top them with that kind of streusely topping. And we're going to bake these at 400 degrees for about 15 minutes. And I wanted to show you guys these beautiful sunflowers my husband brought me because I wasn't feeling well this past couple weeks, and they're just gorgeous. Too pretty not to share, right? Just a little something to brighten your day and brighten everybody's day. These muffins turned out amazing. They're so good. They're not super sweet. They're so delicious with coffee. Personally, I don't love like a lot of sugar in something, and it's something that makes you kind of feel like a little bit healthier, a little bit better. It only has that 1/2 cup of brown sugar, and that's it. So it is just fabulous as it is. The apples give it tons of flavor, and I love that little crunchy topping on there. One of my son's favorite thing in the fall is pumpkin flavored items, including the pumpkin bread from Starbucks. I decided I'm going to make this at home. You just want to start with 1 15-ounce can of solid packed pumpkin, not the pumpkin pie mix, just the 100% pumpkin. Then to that, you add 1 cup of honey, 3/4 of a cup of canola oil or vegetable oil, and 2/3 a cup of water. Then you want to crack in 4 large eggs and 1½ teaspoons of vanilla extract, which I added in later because sometimes I do things in the wrong order. And then you just want to whisk everything together until it is well blended. Oh, look, there's the vanilla. Now I also added in 2 cups of sugar and gave that a stir. Now, I am not a baker, like a great baker, so I don't necessarily follow the instructions like I probably should, and I'm sure that chefs from around the world hate this, but I added 2 teaspoons of baking soda right to my wet mixture and then mixed that in. Then I added 1½ teaspoons of ground cinnamon, a teaspoon of ground nutmeg, 1/2 teaspoon of ground ginger, and a teaspoon of salt, and then just gave that a good mix. Now, I know you're supposed to like add all of that to the flour mixture in a separate bowl and then mix that in, but I hate using extra dishes, so I always do it this way and it turns out fine. So, you know, whatever, to each their own, right? You can totally use a separate bowl and mix everything together if that's the way you want to do it and you find that it works out better. And then we also want to add in 3.5 cups of all-purpose flour. And that is kind of going to be the final step. Once you mix all this together, you have your pumpkin bread batter, and you just want to grease 2 9x5-inch loaf pans. Now I had one 2-pound loaf pan, and then I didn't have a second loaf pan, so I think my loaf pan was like a little bit bigger than was originally anticipated, but not big enough to make just like one huge thing of bread. So I actually made 12 muffins and 1 loaf of bread, which worked out great. And it was like really fun because like the kids are like, ooh, muffins, and my Dan and I are more like, oh, the bread. So, you know, whatever style that you like it in, just know that the muffins cook a lot faster than the bread will because they're just not as thick. You want to bake the bread at 350 degrees for 60 to 70 minutes, but for the muffins, those were done in about 25. So just make sure to start checking them around 20 minutes. And then even in this bread loaf, I think this was about 60 minutes in, I did check my bread, and you can see it's golden and beautiful, and it does look really good, but it's still a little jiggly, like it's not all the way set in the middle. So I just cooked it for another 10 to 15 minutes. So you just want to have to check that as you're going along. And I forgot to mention, the original recipe has you add pepitas or pumpkin seeds right over the top. Now my kid's not a huge fan of seeds, so I didn't add any, and I just didn't even have any on hand, so I don't want to go out and buy any. You can see we grabbed some muffins right away. They were so good. But it's so fun to have this fall bread and make something that is, oh my God, so much cheaper than Starbucks, and you have an entire loaf of it. So I'm a huge fan. It was so good, especially with a delicious cup of coffee. Oh my, this one is delicious. We are doing just a 2-ingredient casserole for breakfast here, and it is too easy not to share. Just want 1 can of store-bought cinnamon rolls and 1 can of apple pie filling, or in my case, I grabbed these fried apples with cinnamon from Aldi, both super inexpensive. So this also makes this casserole come in at under $5. Cut your cinnamon rolls into quarters and then add the entire jar of apple pie filling, or in my case, the fried apples. Those fried apples are absolutely fabulous, but if you can't find them, apple pie filling is also going to be delicious. Pour that into a greased 8x8 baking dish. This recipe is also super easy to double or triple, so if you have more people, just throw in more cans and you're going to be all set. You want to bake this at 400 degrees for about 12 minutes, but go ahead and check it. I think every oven is different, especially depending on kind of the temperature in your kitchen, how cold your cinnamon rolls were when you first put them in, and how many apples you have in there. Look at that bubbling. Is your mouth watering? And then you actually get another ingredient, which is kind of a freebie because it comes in the cinnamon rolls already. Go ahead and pour that delicious icing right over the top, and look how fabulous that is and how simple it was. This is perfect for a Thanksgiving or a Christmas morning where you don't want to do a ton of work, but you want to have something super special. I also think if you had like peach pie filling or pear pie filling, both of those things would taste delicious in this. Now I'm going to make an old-fashioned apple crisp. I truly believe it isn't fall without apple crisp. Now this video was recorded a couple years ago and I was pregnant, so no, I'm not pregnant again. This is just the last time that I recorded an apple crisp, but it's too good not to share. The first thing this recipe calls for is 6 golden delicious apples, which I have already chopped up. And then I am adding 2 tablespoons of sugar and 1 1/3 teaspoons of cinnamon. And then you just want to mix that up really well and let those apples sit. In the meantime, I'm mixing 3/4 a cup of flour with 3/4 a cup of instant oats. To that, you want to add 1 cup of packed light brown sugar. Now I'm going to take a 1/2 cup of cold unsalted butter and dice it up into little squares, and then I'm going to add that into my oat mixture, and I'm going to take a fork to kind of mash it around, and I did end up using my hands just to mix everything together. If you have a pastry cutter, that is exactly what you want to be using here. For some reason, I realized I don't own a pastry cutter, so I think it's about time I get one. But you just want to make sure that you mix it together really well. You don't want to go too crazy with your hands, especially because the butter is supposed to be very cold, and that's what helps everything mix together well. You definitely don't want to microwave the butter or bring it out early, because the cold butter is what helps keep this topping really crispy, and you definitely want a nice crispy apple crisp topping. Now pour your sliced apples into a 9x13 baking pan, and then you're going to top it with the apple crisp topping. Now you just want to bake this in the oven at 350 degrees for 40 to 50 minutes. I personally want to make sure that my apples are fully cooked and everything is like bubbling. So I usually do about 50 minutes, but it's going to depend on your oven. Now I personally recommend you serve this piping hot with a nice scoop of vanilla ice cream on top, but you can use whipped cream or whatever you like as well. Now, I know we already made the Starbucks pumpkin bread, but I cannot have a fall video without these 2-ingredient pumpkin muffins. It is so simple. All you're gonna need is 1 package of Betty Crocker spice cake, and you'll mix that with 1 can of 100% pure pumpkin. Now, when you're mixing this, the mixture is definitely thick. Like, it makes a very thick batter, and that is what you want. Don't add any water to it or anything like that. The pumpkin itself is what's gonna make these so moist and amazing. So you don't want to mess with that, I guess. Just know that it will come out as a thick mixture. And then you just want to add it to 12 muffin cups. So 1 container of spice cake mix and pure pumpkin will equal 12 muffins. And then you're gonna wanna cook these at 375 degrees for 18 to 20 minutes. And here you can see kind of how thick that batter is. You do kind of need to like plop it in there. It's not just gonna pour into the muffin tins. And here are the muffins when they are finished to come out of the oven. You can see that they puff right up. They fill out your whole muffin liner. Keep the fall inspiration going. Click on this next video to get some contest winning soups, and make sure the next time you're on YouTube, you're watching Meals with Maria.